You're listening to the Seed to Exit podcast with your host, Reese Keck. Here you'll learn from startup executives, founders, investors, and industry experts. You'll learn from the best about building amazing products, scaling companies, raising capital, hiring the right people, and more. Subscribe and listen in for new episodes and enjoy the show.
Nick, thanks for coming on. Excited to talk to you.
Thanks, Reese. Likewise. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Well, I love gaming, as I think I talked about a little bit in the episode with Brian Cho. So I'm really excited to talk to you. Tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to create All Star. Obviously, you used to be a pro gamer yourself in the past. How did that shape either the development of the company or the inspiration to found it?
Yeah, so my pro gamer background is in Counter-Strike. I played a whole heck of a lot of it in high school and college. And I felt like I was good, but not getting enough recognition. So I made a couple of movies, and I did it the hard way. I spent thousands of hours capturing and curating and editing. And then I had to convince someone to host it on their website. There was no YouTube or Twitch. And then I had to figure out a way to distribute the video to people. There was no Facebook or social media. And that kind of left a big impression on me. It worked. My content went viral. The next tournament I went to, people wanted to watch me play, shake my hand. It was really, really cool. Kind of left a big impression. I started All Star, 15x years later. And it was a really, really kind of impactful part of that journey because, what I did was something I was fortunate to be able to do. I was lucky. I was creative, technical, fast computer, a lot of free time. Most gamers don't have any of that. So All Star really is technology that automates a lot of what I did and makes it available to anyone. So we kind of say that we enable gamers to share their gameplay more easily than posting a selfie. And when I made my content, it had a big impact on like launching an esports career. And I realized that like most gamers kind of want to do the same thing, but they just don't have the same capabilities. So our technology levels the playing field. We take out all of the sort of friction, the effort. You don't need to be creative. You don't even need to be live streaming or recording your screen. We actually take data from the game and we render it into video out of these things called demo or replay files. And it's actually the same things that I used to create video when I was playing. So you would record these demos every time you played. You'd watch the whole game back. You'd make video from that. So it really was, All Star is very much born out of that origin story and that insight that, it's a really high impact form of content. Many gamers want to make it, and very few can.
So you did a lot of this, pre the websites we all know and use now, pre-social media. But now we do have social media. We do have YouTube. Yeah. We do have Twitch. So what gap are you filling then that these platforms don't?
Yeah, so distribution has definitely gotten a lot more easy in social media, but there's really nothing for gamers. Like Discord's a communications tool. Twitch is more like television than anything else. Things like YouTube, TikTok, they're crowded. And most social media platforms that have gaming media in it are really produced by a very small subset of gamers. It's like your top, 0.01%. So like influencers, professional gamers, pro teams, and like, big organizations like tournaments and things like that. So that is who creates the content. The people that consume it are generally the gamers themselves. And that's kind of, we flip the model. That is who creates content with All Star. So our end user is the everyday gamer. And what we do is we enable them to create and share content with each other. And that's kind of the paradigm shift. That's not something that has really existed before in games. And, our mission is to connect gamers through their content. So our belief is that if you can make it far simpler and easier to make content that's good and watchable, that is kind of the missing piece to the puzzle of how do you create, a real kind of connective tissue around gaming and kind of own this, sort of social network opportunity. And so we started with the media. We built and invented this proprietary technology to make it so that anyone can generate this media. And then that allows you to build, sort of a platform and network around it.
So starting a company is obviously a big leap. You had the chops to do it yourself, but what was the early feedback like? Like, who were the first couple of people you told? What did they think of the idea?
First person was my co-founder and CTO, Gavin. And we met at a digital agency called Blue Fountain Media, where I started my career after pro gaming. I did design. After design, I got into the agency side. Turns out it's very useful to know how to, design and code websites. And then if you can talk to clients and sell stuff and manage things, agencies back then, digital agencies were, those people were in short supply. So I had a really kind of quick rise. The company grew really fast, and I actually hired Gavin onto my accounts team. And we were like opposite in a lot of ways. He was super technical while I was like very creative. So I would, annoy the designers by getting hands-on with design projects. And like he would annoy the developers by getting like hands-on in the code. And I knew something was like different about him when a website would go down. Normally, I have to like phone the project manager, be like, we got to get the site back up. He would just pop open a terminal window and, it would disappear and the site would come back up. And I learned he was like rebooting the servers himself. And so that, kind of we connected through just being friends through games. We both played the same games. Like that was how we became close. We complemented each other really well on the team. So after I left and I went on to Movable Ink, which was a venture-backed MarTech in New York, Gavin stayed on at Blue Fountain. He became their director of operations as they got acquired by a public tech company called Pactera. And so we used to hang out after work. I still live, I lived in Brooklyn. He was in Harlem at the time. Now he's in Jersey. But we used to meet up after work in like Midtown, and we would go hang out at, Wolf Tones or Churchill's. And I had this kind of idea for a while, actually, like All-Star as an idea. The first time I pitched something in this was actually, I think I was like 19 years old. I went to, it was called the CPL, the Cyber Athlete Professional League. And it was the worldwide Counter-Strike tournament in Dallas, Texas, twice a year in the Hilton Ballroom. And I went there and I was just, I was on one of my first like semi-pro teams and we're playing in this big tournament. And I saw a manager of this team, Complexity, this guy, Jason Lake. He's still in esports. He's still a very well-known figure. And I remember I kind of like, tugged on his coat. I was like, hey, excuse me, sir. My name's like Nick Ants Cuomo. I have this idea. I think we could sell Counter-Strike movies. And I didn't really know how to sell it. I didn't know how to build product. I didn't understand like marketing or distribution. I didn't really get why my movies were successful, but I was like, there's money here. There was an opportunity here. And I felt like more people wanted this. And he was like, very nice. He accepted the pitch. He was like, thanks. Like, oh, let's stay in touch and maybe, we'll figure this out at some point. And obviously nothing happened. But so that was like the first person I ever kind of pitched a general idea to. What All-Star really became, I just, Gavin and I met up after work and I was like, listen, man, like, I think there's something here. Creator economy is exploding. Esports is exploding. I still play. Every app sucks. No one gets it. I think I get it. And I'm like, do you think this is technically feasible? Could we get, demos or watch games, get the data, render the video in the cloud? And he was like, maybe, but it'll never work. That was the first reaction, was like, maybe, but it's never going to work. So, so one of the like defining things that I think, has always carried me forward in my career is I am the most persistent, to a fault, very annoying in sales. Like, I'd never give up. And even when you're like, please give up, I'm like, no. So I don't give up. So, a couple weeks go by, we go back to the bar and we're hanging out. And I'm like, all right. So I'm like, I put a spreadsheet together. I'm like, it's going to work. And we laid out the numbers and started to dig in. And he was like, okay. He's like, we should do this. I was like, all right. And then I think a week or two later, we put in our 2 weeks notice at our jobs. We bootstrapped the company for 18 months. And everyone thought we were nuts because we're, not your typical 22-year-old founder who's like, dropping out of college, like not an asset to their names. It's like, we're in our 30s, very well-established, successful tech careers. But we saw a bigger opportunity. I think we both were ready for some change. And I was excited to, really jump back into games with all of this professional career experience now that I have in product development, in marketing, in sales, in tech, in venture scaling tech. So that's kind of the origin story. And I think we're in year 5. And everyone also thought we were a little less crazy once Mark Cuban invested in our pre-seed. Then all of our friends and family were like, okay, we feel better about this decision.
We'll get there. Why didn't he think it was a good idea at first? Why didn't he think it was going to work?
The economics are very complicated, right? If you think about like what we do, we're rendering video in the cloud. Video's heavy, it's expensive. Rendering it doesn't make it cheaper. Dealing with the data that you render it out of doesn't make it cheaper. The sort of viral dynamics of like how you would grow a business like this. Can you monetize it fast enough to deal with the costs? And then like as first time founders, can we raise enough capital to get to scale to do that? And like, is there ever a point where if certain assumptions were true, could this be a profitable business? And that was kind of where the things were, that was his biggest concerns. And so we just dug in and, you start to understand. And it's interesting, we still execute things today that were thought of back then before we were even an official company, because it was like that discussion and that, sort of beating up the idea gave us the levers that we still pull to this day to reduce the cost per clip or increase the, sort of growth rate of the company and reduce the expenses on hosting. It's all related. So we pulled apart those variables once he saw that. Once I saw that and he was like, yeah, I agree. That's not, unbelievable. That was kind of the final.
Love that. So Cuban invested in your pre-seed round,
Mhm.
which I can imagine was a huge boost for credibility, visibility, all the above.
Very good.
How did you make that happen? What was that process like?
Yeah, so our second investor in the company was actually our lawyer, Neil Friedman. He's still our lawyer. And I remember we started a company, we had to find a lawyer. I talked to like 10 or 11 different, we wanted a small independent practitioner. We were bootstrapping, so I'm like, I'm not spending other people's money. I don't want a white shoe, huge retainer. And he was a similar, he was like a startup lawyer and small practice. We hit it off. He was like, you guys are so impressive. This is so exciting. He's like, I would like to invest. And I didn't even know if your lawyer could invest. So I'm Googling, like, can your lawyer invest in your startup? They can. That's not that abnormal. I was like, great. So he invested. Neil and his wife, they had a relationship to Cuban through his wife's work. And so the opportunity to syndicate the pre-seed materials to him presented itself. And she had sent it over to Mark. And so the timing was not the best. I was actually at JFK Airport about to go to Florence, Italy with my then girlfriend, now wife. And, it was our, engagement trip. And I hadn't gone on vacation for like 3 years. So it was like a big trip, go to Italy. We're at the airport. Neil's like calling me in a panic. He's like, Cuban replied. He has questions. I'm like, what? Okay. So, we're like banging out the email because, every second counts, right? It's like now I'm in
Absolutely.
sales mode. Like we have a live one here. And he is asking questions directly. They're smart questions. And so we like bang out the reply, calling our name. Literally, like gates are closing. Barely made it on the plane. Long story short, she said yes, he said yes. I had like I don't know, felt like 30 pounds, like a very heavy gamer laptop with me. Just, through Italy, I would like, we get an email, I would stop at find a cafe with Wi-Fi and reply back to him. And granted, he was understanding. And he gave me a few days in the first weekend we were there before we started really going and digging in. Because I think Neil's wife explained, like, yeah, Nick just got to Italy with his, girlfriend. They're gonna get engaged. He was like, all right, have him reach out to me on Monday. And then, but it was we got into due diligence by the end of the trip. So not the most relaxing vacation, but super memorable, really, really cool. And it was just, he loves email. I love email. So just lots of email back and forth, and just he got it immediately. And his questions were very deeply technical, which I really appreciated, because he didn't care about a lot of the fluff that many investors care about, which, a lot of founders kind of groan at, because it's like, okay, culture. It's like, that culture is important. Yes. But like at this stage, it's like, how does the technology work? Does that scale? So that was the stuff he was like, how does the tech work? Does it work with Fortnite? That was one of his questions. And I was like, Yeah, like we had to go and do some diligence, and I was like, yes, it will work with Fortnite. And we actually just launched one of our first Fortnite partners just a few months ago, and so we have a huge network in Fortnite growing at this point. So it was pretty cool stuff, and I just loved how hands-on he was. You would not expect that out of someone like him.
Right. So you didn't even pitch him live. It was all over email.
No, Shark Tank, all email. Never spoke to the guy on the phone, haven't met him in person. Still to this
Wow.
day, he will reply to any email within 20 minutes. And when we used to send out like very frequent investor newsletter updates, he would be the first person to open them like every time. I don't know how he does that, but that's probably why he's a billionaire, if I had to guess. So,
Wow. That's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
What do you send out in your investor newsletter updates? I'm curious.
So we used to, so there's two. We haven't done that since Series A. We've just got a lot more focused on working with the board, executing the business, and we'll send out updates at this point, like twice a year is kind of where we're at. In the past, we used to have a more generic newsletter that would go out to like a prospect investor list and existing investor list. So it's kind of like a corporate newsletter geared towards investors. So it's like company updates, product development, hiring, milestones, but like nothing too sensitive. And then for our existing investor base, I type really fast. That was always like my pro gamer skill. I am very fast on a keyboard. So as you might imagine, very long-winded when I talk and when I type. So, it's very easy for me to provide like long form detailed updates and, just go like kind of function by function, like product, marketing, growth, finances, talent, whatever. And, the milestones, then there'll be like a summary, executive summary on, my view as CEO as the state of the business, the good, the bad, and then kind of looking ahead. And I think the investors always have always appreciated that, like, we don't sugarcoat and we'll always provide a balance of like, this is going really well. This is not. And, this is what we're doing about it. And I think investors are, they're used to a lot of founders be very rosy, everything's super positive, and that's
Sure.
never the truth. If you've ever built a business, you do execution. Some days suck really bad, and you're like, "Where's the face punch going to come from?" And then other days are like cloud nine. Oh my God, everything's going amazing. And so I think a lot of the more builder investors get that, and they're suspicious if everything's positive because that's just never the case.
Yeah, that's so funny. I just had Cal Patel on from Bright Insights. They're in digital health. They're Series C, and he said
Yeah.
almost that exact same thing. He's like,
Yeah.
if you tell your investors everything's good, someone is lying.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, even the best company on earth, it's not going that well. There's good and there's bad. That's life.
So how do you, since you're more on the B2C side, how do you target your user base in terms of user acquisition and growth?
Yeah, so this is kind of our secret weapon, not so secret anymore. So, the nature of our technology, so All Star is kind of leading like a paradigm shift. And that is until us, gamers made content by live streaming or recording their screen. So you had to have an app installed. You had to be, creating video from the client device you're playing a game on in real time. Introduces a lot of issues. You lose frame rate. You're eating up your connection, your storage. It's distracting you from the game. You might forget to create a clip because you're too focused on making the moments happen. So that prevents a lot of gamers from making content. 1 in 4 gamers want to create, less than 0.01% do. And that we believe is a technology gap. Everyone makes content on social media. 40 to 60% of monthly users contribute to platforms like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok. It's because we all have phone in our pocket. You don't really have that in a game. It's like, you're on the phone while you're playing the game. It's not the most conducive way to create content. You're also stuck with what you see. So you can't take 20 selfies in a row and only post the best one. So our technology gives people the ability to do that because we render it in the cloud. It's off of game data. It's server side. So there's nothing happening on your client. We can't impact performance. So this was our sort of consumer user value prop. The nature of how we achieved that by making this a server side technology opened up a user acquisition strategy that to this date, we've had a hard time finding anyone that's done something like this. So that makes it really hard to like plan and optimize because it's like a net new channel. So the channel that we've effectively invented are like personalized cloud generated game highlights. So what we do is we offer free APIs to partners, and we have a developer portal, and it's kind of like Stripe for game highlights. So if you're building a website, you're building a desktop app, a mobile app, and you're focused on a game that we focus on, like Counter-Strike, Fortnite, League of Legends, Dota 2. There's probably a half dozen other games coming up on the roadmap, but these like hardcore multiplayer competitive games. If you're building something for those games, you're probably accessing the same data that we use to make video, and you wish you had video. And no one has video because making video from that data is insane. So that's like the whole reason we exist is because like it's a crazy thing to do. So we have like 2 data centers, we have like physical metal hardware. We just set up a new rack I think literally this week. Make 1 clip a second. And we have an API, and people plug in and they request content, and we render it and deliver it. And then that video player that's embedded basically exposes the gamer to our product. So the experience, if you think about it from the gamer's perspective, is they play a game, they use a product they already love, and then like magically out of thin air, their like 1080p 60 high-powered gamer selfie is just waiting for them. They didn't have to have an app installed. They didn't press a button. They weren't streaming. And so the first thing you get is curiosity. They're like, how did they make a video from the game that I just played? I wasn't doing anything to do that. The second thing is they start to think how that could work. And then it basically explains all of the questions they might have about our product, because gamers are smart. They put 2 and 2 together. They're like, oh, they had access to the demos, the replays, the server. They rendered the video for me. They probably know who I am from, my Steam login or something. And that's a really great way to educate people about a very complicated product. It's very difficult to explain to someone on a landing page how All-Star works. It's very easy to explain to someone by just showing it to them. And so it's kind of neat. We put the best part of our product as the first thing someone sees. And that's how we acquire most of our users. About 2/3 of our new monthly users come from basically our partner network, which it spans 3 games: Counter-Strike, League of Legends, and Fortnite, with partners on the way in other games. And that partner network represents a combined reach of upwards of 20 million monthly gamers. We're only really tapping into 1/20th of that right now. So there's some really exciting growth in store for us. And it's really interesting because it's, again, a very novel channel. And it's awesome to own your user acquisition channel. But, I'm sure that in the early days of Google paid search and dealing with SEO and kind of inventing this plane while you're flying it, it's a typical startup thing. It comes with a unique set of challenges that you're not going to really be able to read a book on or talk to somebody and get the answers. You kind of have to just be in it and deal with the react to the pressures that drive innovation. So that's really what's kind of pushed us forward and helped us get to 1 clip a second, and helped us do this scalably, where we're not just burning through our bank account in a month. So it's a really, really cool way to acquire users, in my opinion.
It is. I mean, yeah, you've basically taken the show, don't tell principle to the extreme, more or less.
Surprise and delight. Yeah. Yeah.
So, okay, so you integrate with a few different games right now. And I know you mentioned you have a few more on the roadmap. Is there any sort of plan to expand? And I didn't hear you specifically say this, but it sounds like it's just for console or for PC or Mac at this point. Do you have any plans to expand to console? Is that just something that's not technologically feasible?
We clip across all platforms and devices right now in Fortnite, actually. So we create videos in the cloud out of their Fortnite tournaments that are people enter right from the Fortnite launcher. And these tournaments are run across mobile, console, and PC. And so that's what's kind of neat about All-Star is our technology doesn't care. It doesn't know the difference. It doesn't matter. All the content looks the same. It's just the gameplay. It's just the data of the match. It's what happened as if you were watching it live. So that is kind of our big vision, is that ultimately this is how all gameplay should be shared, is starting at the gameplay data and rendering that server side instead of trying to capture that client side at different resolutions, different graphics qualities, different sort of technical challenges. And so that we're currently doing that across platforms and devices, but our long term is really to go into the game engines and abstract this out and be both the replay and the UGC infrastructure, and that will enable us to really scale this out across generally any game on any platform or device.
Got it. And so from a scaling perspective, obviously there's a financial component to that, and you've continued to raise. You raised an $18 million Series A. What was that process like? Do you plan to raise again? How are you thinking about things from a fundraising and growth standpoint?
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of always raising money in a startup. Like that's kind of ends up being your next milestone, even if you're not thinking about it. It's like you close a round and then you're like, all right, let's execute, let's build. And then a few months go by and you're like, all right, like what's the next sort of milestone between us and our big vision? It's like usually another round. So we'll likely look to raise more financing in the next year. We're not under the gun or feeling too much pressure there. But I think for us, the fundraising cycle itself, Series A was tough. It was a tough year. I had a lot of people reach out and were like, "Whoa, like crazy! Can't believe you raised a Series A during 2023." And I don't have any particular like this is the magic bullet of how we did that. It was just the same thing we always do when we raise. We run a pretty tight process. We put together a really good material. We focus really hard on the iterative feedback of understanding where investors are getting hung up or what they're getting really excited about. How do we kind of bring that more to the surface? And then just grinding. I have a lot of background in sales, so I'm very used to being on the road, spending a lot of time just back to back to back meetings. And we'll usually go to GDC. I think last year I went to GDC and I had 30 meetings in 3 days. So it's a long couple of days. But that's the kind of energy you put in. And I don't know if I honestly don't think any of those meetings converted to financing. But I can tell you that the noise that makes and the sort of energy input and output, that's how sales has always worked for me is, you work really, really hard over here and then the success starts to happen over there. So that is a bit of how I describe the process. But, there's usually kind of the stages of finding the lead, like, creating your list, getting out there, doing the initial pitching, seeing who's going to move into like deeper, diligence and questions, than actually real due diligence before, a term sheet, or sometimes term sheet before real due diligence. And then you have legal and closing. And legal was a bit protracted there because we had a very large cap table from our earlier rounds. There was a lot of complex things that needed to get cleaned up by very expensive law firms. So that was one lesson learned is actually probably should have paid the more expensive law firms a little earlier in the company. It would have saved us a bunch of money at Series A, but it's first time doing this, so live and learn, I guess.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Live and learn.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to gamers that are, I know you mentioned, 25% want to create content, but
Yeah.
only I think 1% or 0.01% do.
Yep.
So for the vast majority who are not, what advice would you give them in terms of growing their personal brand and making the most of platforms like All-Star or other ones?
Yeah. So I think it depends on what kind of creator you want to be. If you're just creating for fun, to share and connect with your friends, then you don't really have to think too much about it. I think you just need to find the tool that suits your style. I think for the competitive, multiplayer gamers, esports players, All-Star is really the best solution. It doesn't have an impact on your performance. You don't have to worry about creating content while you're playing. You just press a button or you don't even press a button. You come to the website after the match is over, find the match, find the moment, share it. That experience is much more, attuned to that type of gamer. Now, if you're trying to be an influencer, you want to really make money. So we have some products coming out that will enable brands to work with our community of gamers to drive engagement and growth, and to directly incentivize the gamer. I'm a big believer that I think, advertising in games is a little broken. And I think no one's really cracked the nut of how you extract, real revenue out of advertising in games. And it's because they don't understand gamers. Gamers are, playing games that are highly immersive. You don't really want to disrupt that immersion. They expect a very high ROI from their entertainment dollars. So, if you're trying to monetize them even further, that is going to leave them a little upset. They could spend $0 on a free to play game and play it for 10,000 hours. So you're going to, now you're going to start to, expect them to sit through a bunch of ads or, have a worse gameplay experience so you make money. That's not really going to, fly. And then I think the last piece is that all of the stuff the brands really want, like getting into the games, reaching gamers with like good reporting, brand safety, very expensive. Influencers are very expensive, hard to manage, platforms, programmatic, very blockable. Ad blockers are very popular. Twitch, very few gamers, I think 0.1% of Twitch streamers make median income. So the vast majority of Twitch streamers are trying and burning out and stuff like that. So my message would be, be patient, try All-Star in a couple of months. We started to launch more of these competitions. We're bringing brands in to sponsor them. And our whole sort of angle is sort of user-generated content marketing, but driven through a platform and a technology where it's not so much a high friction endeavor. It's more automated. And the gamer directly earns from this, right? So we're cutting out the middleman. It's not just the influencer getting paid. There's no, it's like, let's get the gamer incentivized to drive results for the brands and put them into the gameplay in a way that doesn't disrupt the game. So that's what's coming for us. And I think the best practices still apply for any creator. It's like create content that's new, find your niche, make it stand out, and you got to be consistent and persistent. You have to have that schedule. It's like my dad always said, if you're going to open a store and, you have to make your hours and be consistent, because otherwise a customer is going to show up and say, I expect them to be open. It's, whatever, 10:30 on a Friday, but they're not open yet. Right. So as a streamer or a YouTube creator, you have to like make content on a schedule. You need to set expectations and meet them with your audience. And then I think you have to just be across every channel. I think you saw this as TikTok exploded. YouTube and Twitch creators had to, flood to TikTok. That's where their audience was. They were going to lose that mind share if they didn't follow them there. Everyone has a Discord community. You have to have a place to, connect with people directly. So I think that stuff is super important and it's hard. It's very, very hard. So, we're trying to make it a little easier for that. We're calling them kind of like nano influencers where, if you're really good at a game, you've got an interesting take on content, you've got something unique to bring to the table. We can help connect you with brands and, maybe you're not going to quit your job tomorrow, but, perhaps you're going to have an easier time buying groceries. Or you're going to have some extra spending money to buy a new set of headphones, something like that. So that's kind of where we're taking things, but it's a tough gig. Creating is hard, very noisy, very competitive. Most people want to be creators. The younger you go, I think 80% of Gen Z wants to be a content creator. So it's a very, very competitive market.
Yeah, I mean, I fully resonate with a lot of what you said there, even as a, creator in the context of this podcast, right? Like every Tuesday at 6 a.m. Central is when I publish the new episode. And there have been Monday nights where I'm like, God damn it, shit, I didn't edit it yet. I got to jump on and do it. And it's, I don't have, yeah, exactly. And it's not like I have 100,000 listeners and there's going to be a bunch of people opening it up. It's like, but if you don't have that consistency, you're never going to build it and get there in the first place.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's the hard part. And it's also like building a company, there's these it's like the crossing the chasm idea where, there's this period where you're just kind of working. You're like, what am I getting out of this? How is this working for me? And the idea is like, well, you're never going to cross that chasm. You're never going to get to the other side without, the consistency and just, it's like kind of, I guess, if you build it, they will come. Don't always agree with that. I think some people conflate that with like, I can build a product with no distribution. It's like, that's not what I'm saying. But for content, I think it makes a lot of sense.
If you build it and market it properly, they will come.
Not as catchy, but
not as catchy, but probably a little truer. So final question then, just on a little bit more of a personal note.
Yeah.
You're obviously a former pro gamer yourself. You have very deep roots within the gaming community.
Mm.
What's something that you wish more people understood either about gamers or just the gaming industry in general?
Uh, I will, let's see here. I'll give advice to three different groups of people here because I think I would have a different thing to say for everyone. I think for founders, getting into games, if you're coming from not games like traditional business, just be aware that there are founders and companies and people out there that have more of a gamer mindset than like a professional business person mindset. It's just a very different type of personality to deal with. They play the game differently. They'll, do things where you're like, that's unprofessional, or you're being, I wouldn't necessarily do something like that, but they're thinking like a gamer. They're not thinking like a business person. And once I understood that, and I've had some interesting experiences in the industry, it just kind of the light bulb went off, and I went back to my pro gamer days, and I was like, I know how to deal with this. This is I understand that mindset. So that's sometimes you're dealing with the gamer, not the business person, even if their title and their role and their accomplishments and the amount of money they raise is business. I think to investors, the teams, they have to care about games. You gotta be passionate. It's the same thing like there was the clean tech. There's like a whole, sort of the bubble years back. There's a lot of like companies that were started by like, kind of clean shaven executives and guys in suits and salespeople. And, I'm a salesperson, I was an executive, but I'm a gamer. Like these, all these clean tech companies were started by people that weren't technical. They weren't engineers. And there's this great kind of excerpt in 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, where he talks about that, like they just started passing on anyone that didn't look like an engineer, because there was so many companies that were being founded pitching for funding. And, clean tech is like, read it in backwards, tech that's clean. So if like you're not a tech person, you don't understand engineering, like you're probably not going to have a good time solving that problem. You might be able to raise a bunch of money, but like, you're solving climate issues through technology. So you kind of have to start there. So if you're investing in games, like you got to be investing in gamers, and they got to be like, it has to have been a real big part of their life. And I think also that like deep personal connection gets you past the hard part. There's a lot of ups and downs. We were talking about this earlier in building a company and running a startup, and the ups and the downs get a lot easier when you're really passionate about what you do. So I think you have both a more durable founder as well as a better shot at executing the industry. And then my last piece of advice would be to, I think anyone in gaming that, wants to be a pro or wants to create like a career out of it. And I think you need to just stick with it. Practice makes perfect. And, the idea that someone is just so talented that that's why they're successful, I think is a fallacy. And I think the only thing that luck really gives people is the right time and place to be able to practice a lot. And I think if you do 10,000 hours of anything, you'll be amazing. I think anyone could be a pro gamer. Anyone could be a professional influencer. You got to just really, really want it, and you got to just not give up, and you got to go real far, real hard. So yeah, that's my three cohorts of, if I could go back in time and, give myself advice in these different sorts of mindsets, that's probably what it would be.
Well, that's some incredible advice. Nick,
Thanks.
Thank you for that. And thank you for coming on in general.
Thanks, Reese. I appreciate you having me. This was great. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to Seed to Exit. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.